All right, close your eyes and imagine this. It's the year 1775, and here in this moment, 13 small colonies on the edge of North America are about to stand against the most powerful empire in the world, Great Britain. They're gonna fight for independence from the crown, and they're gonna win. But no one could have guessed at the time that this struggle would give birth to a new nation, the United States of America. What if I told you that there was a secret weapon that helped them do it? Well, spoiler alert, it was called the Committee of Correspondence, and it's our topic for today. The Committee of Correspondence was a communications network that spread throughout all 13 colonies, and its main purpose was to keep colonists informed of all grievances against the Crown. But how did it work? Well, that's what we're going to find out together. Imagine you are a colonist living in the early 18th century. If you wanted to communicate with someone across the colonies, it would take months for a letter to arrive. This was because there were no roads connecting the colonies. Travel had to be done by ship or on foot through the wilderness. There was also no postal service like we know it today. So finding someone to carry your message would be difficult. Even if you did find someone, the chances of them delivering your message safely were slim. Because of the high cost of postage, messages often had to be smuggled aboard merchant ships or hidden in barrels on slow-moving freight ships. Sometimes colonists would even hide letters inside hollowed-out Bibles to get them past British censors. So not only was communication slow, it was dangerous and expensive. This made it nearly impossible for people to share news with each other. But this would all change in 1764, when the first Committee of Correspondence was formed. In this year, Massachusetts colonists met together in a congress in Concord and decided to create a committee whose job it would be to correspond with other colonies. This meant that if something happened in New York, Massachusetts would hear about it within weeks, not months. Members of this committee lived throughout the colonies and were usually local leaders who were respected by their communities. Some were merchants who conducted business throughout the colonies and had many contacts. Others were printers like John Hancock, who used their trade to spread news to the public. Now, it's important to note that these committees didn't last forever. In fact, they were disbanded after every session of Parliament, so that members could avoid being arrested by British authorities. But each new committee was elected just as the old one was disbanded, keeping the chain of communication alive. Now, let's say you're a member of the Committee of Correspondence in Philadelphia. How would you go about communicating with, say, a member in Charleston? Well, since travel was so dangerous, most correspondence took place via written messages. These were usually sent by young couriers who were paid for their services. They would travel quickly and secretly through the wilderness, avoiding major roads and British checkpoints. Couriers sometimes traveled in groups for safety, and they would conceal their messages by hiding them in everyday items like shoes or clothing. When a courier arrived in Philadelphia, he would give his message to the local committee. Then, depending on what the message said, the committee would call an emergency meeting or wait until their scheduled meeting. At this meeting, they would read the message to the other committee members. Since the couriers traveled so quickly, the committees had to be ready to act on important matters at a moment's notice. For example, if the British were planning an attack on Boston, the committee would send couriers to warn the other colonies. In this way, the committee kept everyone in the colonies informed of any threats from the British. But the Committee of Correspondence wasn't just for emergencies. They also shared non-urgent information that was important to the well-being of the colonies. They communicated details about upcoming meetings, laws passed by Parliament, and reports from other colonies. For example, if Massachusetts learned that the British were planning to impose a new tax, they would notify the other colonies right away. This way, everyone would be prepared and could respond accordingly. So far, we've talked about how the Committee of Correspondence kept the colonies informed of important information, but it also played a key role in uniting the colonies. As you can imagine, having representatives from each colony meet together and discuss their grievances with the Crown created a sense of unity among the colonists. For example, when the British passed the Stamp Act, which required colonists to pay a tax on all printed materials, the Committee of Correspondence organised a boycott of British goods. This showed the colonists that they were stronger together than they were apart. And speaking of the Stamp Act, the Committee of Correspondence played an important role in the events that led up to the American Revolution. When news of the Stamp Act reached the colonies, the committee organized protests and boycotts, which caused the British government to repeal the act. This was a major victory for the colonists, and it showed that they didn't have to accept everything the British government threw at them. But not everyone was happy with the Committee of Correspondence. Some colonists were loyalists, meaning they supported the British government. They felt that the committee was creating unnecessary conflict between the colonies and Great Britain. In fact, some of the most vocal opponents of the committee were wealthy merchants who profited from trade with Britain. These merchants argued that the committee was damaging the economy by encouraging people to boycott British goods. But despite the opposition, the Committee of Correspondence continued to grow in popularity throughout the colonies. As tensions between the colonists and the British government continued to rise, the committee became more radical in its views. Instead of just boycotting British goods, the colonists began to call for independence from Great Britain. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress declared that the 13 colonies were free and independent states. The Committee of Correspondence had played a major role in convincing the colonists that independence was possible. After the Declaration of Independence, the Committee of Correspondence continued to play an important role in the American Revolution. The committee helped to organize the Continental Army and raise money for the war effort. It also continued to communicate with other countries, such as France and Spain, to try to get them to support the revolution. In the end, the Committee of Correspondence was successful in winning the support of these countries, and the United States won the war. The Committee of Correspondence is an important part of the story of the founding of the United States. Without the committee, it's unlikely that the colonists would have been able to unite and fight for independence from Great Britain. The committee played a key role in organizing the American Revolution and winning the support of other countries. The Committee of Correspondence was a truly secret weapon in the founding of the United States. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Was the Committee of Correspondence a secret weapon in the founding of the United States? Why or why not? Also, tell us in the comments section what you found most interesting about the Committee of Correspondence. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button so we know to keep making more of them. And if you haven't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. Until then, I'll see you next time.